Joining us, it's time for our agenda right now. Dr. Adedeji Adeniran, Director of Research at CSEA. That's the Center for the Studies of the Economies of Africa, if I got that right.
That's right. Thank
you. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah, it's been quite a while.
Yeah,
It's been quite a while. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking this question. I know we're talking about inflation, surviving the high cost of living and some other things, but let me start fundamentally as a researcher, and as someone that watches what's been happening in the space for a very long time now. With the recent news around us economically, what do you think is the most pressing one for you? What's the most pressing issue, or most burning issue for you at this point? What do you think?
So I think for me, I mean, we are in the midst of many economic challenges as a nation and globally. However, I mean, out of all of this, you would want to single out unemployment as one of the most burning issue, because I mean, it has ramification for most of what we see in terms of productivity, effective use of our labor force, and also poverty is all linked to functioning of the labor market, and that's actually kind of the most pressing issue for me. I mean, if you look at some of the other challenges that as a nation we are facing, insecurity, I mean, you can also think of this as part of inadequate uses of our youth. I mean, when the labor market is not functioning well, it has a lot of kind of effects that manifest in various ways, and in a way, I mean, that's like the priority.
Okay, I'll try and come back to that in terms of whether we have a dysfunctional labor first, or dysfunctional labor market. I'll come back to that in a bit, but you brought out even some of the things we looked at on the show yesterday in terms of poverty and in terms of poverty. But let me now take you to inflation. Inflation for the country, 6.3%, 15.63% in December. That was an uptick from after about 7 or 8 months decline. What are your expectations for inflation, especially as we expect even the January one?
So, I mean, likely this year, I mean, the expectation is that inflation will still be kind of high and hovering around that 15 to 16% throughout the year. The expectation around this is based on fiscal kind of season, I mean, the political season we are entering into. I mean, there's a lot of expenditure and a lot of spending for that pushing, and this kind of demand will actually push price higher and higher. But also the structural factors that we talked about that has been actually a challenge for the kind of main cause of why we're having this high inflation, I mean double digits in Nigeria, has not been adequately addressed if you look at it. I mean, insecurity issues are still there, supply disruption, logistics system inadequacy are still kind of key challenges that we are not seeing. But also, I mean, the elephant in the room, the exchange rate volatility is still also a big challenge. I mean, you see central bank governor pronouncement yesterday about new policy. So you see that CBN actually is quite worried about this, and over again, they roll out new policies to actually address the issue of exchange rate. So when you combine all of this factor with then the political season we are entering into, you want to actually don't bet that we might not see kind of single digit this year. Of course, some months it might reduce based on whether we manage, I mean, those kind of factors in such months very well. But overall, I think we are still going to be in this territory over the year, during this year.
That's scary, to be in the territory of 15 and 16% this year, based on what you have said. Foreign exchange risk, as well as pre-election year, we're going to be seeing perhaps intra-party spendings and all of that. Those kind of spendings that will come especially from intra-party activities, how much of it do you think will filter into the greater marketplace? And let me be specific of what I'm saying. Perhaps some people would, or some sectors would experience inflows from intra-party activities, for example, the printing industry, perhaps the media, and all of that. Apart from those sectors, do you see those activities really, affecting
So
yes, the economy.
so
I
the-
hope you get what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I
trying to
got your
say.
question.
And to what extent?
So the main channel actually that this affects the economy, and especially in this discussion, exchange rate, might be the uncertainty. So for example, you expect change of government in next year. I mean, new regime will come in, new person, irrespective of who wins. And as an investor, you want to actually, if you want to say come to Nigeria, you want to actually stay and seek clarity about what is going on before you actually make such investments. So those kind of uncertainty have been well documented, in fact, in the literature on Nigeria around politicking in Nigeria, investors trying to wait and see what is going to happen and who is going to emerge before actually going on long-term investment again. So that's one major channel that we'll see. And that has implication for exchange rate, whether people want to invest in Nigeria on a long term or not, I mean, in that regard. So that's one aspect of it. But also, we know our politics and the way it works in some ways. There is one, government actually needs to also show in terms of what they've done, and that way you see a lot of spending on many infrastructure and everything to show that this is what we have delivered in the last 4 years. But also, we're also going to see a lot of other spendings that would also manifest in that regard. So it's both spending effect and the uncertainty effect that I think we need to capture that actually magnify this and makes it a kind of important fundamentals to look into when we look at what will happen this year and how things will go.
You know what? I also want to ask this question, which is about pre-election year and election. Okay, pre-election year and pre-election year really, especially as it would impact inflation. And I want to speak specifically to, are we really exaggerating the impact of election spending? You know what, because we should even have a cap to what election spending should be about, talking about campaign finance and all of that, which I know our politicians don't follow. But aren't we exaggerating the effect really of what those politicians will be spending, especially what we have seen from 2015 till now? Many people say there's no money. Even the politicians say there's no money. I guess that the politicians themselves, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So are we really exaggerating that fact that we expect money from those politicians? And to what extent?
Well, so personally, I don't know how much this effect is. I've never seen the number or any study on that specifically. But I mean, it's just the larger narrative around the political economic cycle that is well documented for developing countries that has shown that during election, pre-election, I mean, there is this kind of spending. But I mean, my colleagues at the center have actually looked at the number for capital market and inflows of investment. And I think it's clear from that evidence that that's actually one of the most kind of significant effects in the Nigerian context in terms of investors needing to pause and see and wait and see what is going to happen. And that, to me, it's actually one of the major effects because, I mean, when you talk about exchange rates, you talk about demand and supply of demand for dollars and the rest. And if foreign investors are not coming, I mean, if people say, okay, let's wait, see what is going to happen in the Nigerian market, it has a lot of kind of effects policy-wise and in terms of how much the exchange rate market would actually stabilize.
You're talking about investors having that wait and see attitude. Where I'm really looking at is these politicians really, if we're talking of, okay, we're waiting for them to spend or they're going to spend. To what extent really are they going to spend? And where are they even spending on? Is it the delegates? Okay, now I know that we have a law that the president is here to sign. I don't want to go into all of that. But is it that they're giving delegates money? I don't know if you're seeing what I'm saying, you know, but perhaps there should be a study on that. And we also got to be clear in terms of how much is our campaign finance. So we'll be able to, you know, be specific. But let me leave you on that a bit and give you the space there. You know, let's move over to actually what you said earlier, what we saw the Bankers Committee do yesterday. The Bankers Committee with the central bank governor came out to announce, you know, what the Bankers Committee and the Apex Bank had done in terms of, they called it the RT 200 billion FX repatriation program. You mentioned it earlier. It's also a way, perhaps an indirect way, or perhaps even direct, to check some of this risk that we're experiencing around FX. How do you see this playing out? Is it a good policy?
So, I mean, for me, I think if you look at it in the general context, broadly around what government has been doing, emphasizing on non-oil sector and trying to drive it and use that as a kind of way to ensure stability in the exchange rate market in Nigeria. I think that's a good policy in that regard. So what I see, I mean, we still need more clarity around this, how this will play out. But what I see is a continuation of what we see. You know, there was a time that central banks stopped giving exchange rate to
BDCs.
Now it's the bank. And so one thing you want to speculate is maybe some kind of the arbitrage that we see in the DBC. Maybe bank is unable to sufficiently stem that too. And in a way, it's also kind of in the direction of trying to close that gap between the official and the black market rates in a way to ensure that we focus on productive sector of the economy rather than the arbitrage kind of opportunity that could be targeted, I mean, in terms of how we use and utilize this kind of windows. So, but the key thing is how do we manage this effectively? Because, for example, I mean, banks themselves actually don't actually make, they don't actually generate exchange. Exchange rate comes from you selling. And that has to be with rail sector. I think the target or the message to bank is you need to actually just support exchange rate market. You need to support non-oil sector. And I think if this message is clear, in terms of time and window they have been given, I think we should be able to see and track maybe key metrics suggest that bank will adequately be able to say this. I think it's good to actually put a sunset clause in terms of when this will come in, but I think we also need to track it to ensure that at least when that time comes, do we see something that would work or something that we still need to really think about? I think that's what we should be looking forward to in the next 10 months when this is expected to play out.
From what I saw yesterday, it's also a way to like unlock more the non-oil sector.
Sure.
In terms of getting banks perhaps by force.
Yeah.
You know, getting banks by force now to work with manufacturers to boost that sector so that we can go from raw materials or primary products to exporting, and you get those dollars in or the foreign currency, thereby also boosting foreign reserves.
Sure.
If we take a look at it, the Bankers Committee, from the communique yesterday, or from what the governor read, it's anchored on 5 pillars. Number 1, value-adding exports facility, in case for those that did not watch or didn't get to see that. Non-oil commodities expansion facility, non-oil FX rebate scheme, dedicated non-oil export terminal, and a biannual non-oil export summit. This RT200 is based on those 5 pillars. So this is how they'll be looking at it. If we take a look at the non-oil commodities expansion facility and perhaps looking at the drive to revive the commodity exchange, the NCX, in Nigeria, how do you think that this would play out? You know, because I specifically even asked a question yesterday around warehousing, for example, because we know that many Nigerian products, when they get they reject. We know what happened around beans some years ago and some of our products. So how do you see that?
So, I mean, if you look at the manufacturers in Nigeria, one of their key complaints has always been an exchange rate. And in a way, they have actually always been working with either a middleman in terms of either DBCs or bank in having access to this. I mean, prioritizing them is a good thing. And in a way, if we can really sieve out people that are actually really doing into this export and people that are into it for arbitrage opportunity, I mean, targeting those real players, I think would really be positive for us. So there are many ways we can look at this as how it will play out in future. So for example, we know that one of the key challenges, like you mentioned, is the logistics system in Nigeria, which is quite poor. How do we ensure we move from factory and farm to the port? I mean, that's a major issue. We know the problem in Nigerian ports system, and the challenges where people prefer to export to get it to other countries. And so those kind of structural challenges needs to be addressed simultaneously with this. So it's not about whether this is going to work, it's about do we really, does it actually draw and target the fundamental issues. And those are the fundamental issues, like you say, quality. How do we ensure we improve quality? How do we ensure we our logistics system such that the communication, ICT, and whatever infrastructure we need to connect people within those value chain, it's actually adequately catered for. Farmers that are on the farm, how do we ensure that what they are producing is actually going to be something that actually at the level of that make the exports kind
processing.
of yeah. So those are the other factors that we need to simultaneously. That's why I think central bank plan on this is great. However, to really make this work, I mean, there needs to be policy coordination. I mean, there are sectoral agencies that have a key role to play in this. Agricultural sector, Exim Bank has a, I mean, the finance, the Ministry of Finance, Customs, all of them have a very huge role to play in this. So it's about policy coordination. I mean, signaling this is great, but I mean, working with these other agencies to address some of these bottlenecks is quite critical, and that's where we can really have that benefit of all what this is all about.
And you know, some of what you have said have been filtering in, and that's why we've also been seeing inflation on the high side in terms of the structural bottlenecks, coupled with the insecurity situation in the country. Some farmers now don't want to go to the farms because it's not safe. For them. So if you're having less farmers on the farms, you can imagine what will happen. The few farmers on the farms will risk their lives and go to the farms and may not produce enough for us to eat, or will produce and their prices are higher, and it will be extended to those of us that are end consumers. But I also want to ask this: how at this point should we survive this inflation?
Interesting.
Interesting. We've been surviving it perhaps for the past how many years, because we've seen inflation on the high side for a very long time. The CBN has a single-digit target. It hasn't met that in years, you know. So how do we survive this? How can you even explain to Nigerians now?
So I mean, when you mentioned the issue of farmers and how that has been an issue, so most times, I mean, when they want to farm, they go into the, they don't actually farm close to their communities, but now most of them actually, and that means they are farming lesser area, and those has implications about how, I mean, the quality and quantity of what you actually you are going to be getting in that regard. So, I mean, those are kind of critical issues. How should Nigerians, or how could individuals, I mean, it's about individual coping strategy. It's, I mean, it's government role to actually address this, but I mean, there are also, I mean, we've seen some individual coping strategy. And I think in a way you will have seen, for example, you see individuals going to substitution, trying to mitigate this through, I mean, if you are buying something, so one way people could do it is buying things in bulk if you have the capacity. I mean, that's not going to work for a poor man, but I mean, kind of substituting front loading. I mean, those are kind
if you have money.
Yeah, those are the kind of strategy people could think of. I mean, but also we might also, as individual, I mean, it's also a question beckoning on us about also income diversification. We need to rely on so much, and because I mean,
I was telling Clifford earlier, one of our viewers that sent me, how can you have financial freedom with little earnings? So it's, first of all, you diversify your source of income, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so how you manage inflation is depend if it's very I mean, high inflation. It's about whether you can grow your income to supersede the rate of growth in inflation. That's the only way you can survive. And it's about how do I draw my human capital, resources that I have actually to cope, and how can the system help me to actually do better for myself. I mean, in that area is what we can do. I mean, people that has also little money, I mean, investment option is things that actually have high interest rates, such that the rate of interest exceed that rate of inflation. That's actually what you want to be thinking of. But I mean, in a way, for I mean, people at the bottom, you just don't see those kind of the basket of options is not that big. But I mean, in a way, it's all about how do we draw on our social kind of network as a individual, and I think that has been what has been the best coping strategy, that you see people actually drawing on themselves in terms of what they have, investment they have, human capital, in order to actually do better for themselves and for their family, but also looking within our community to also support ourselves in trying moments.
I like what you said, and perhaps we should dig deep further. What you just said, let me put it into two things you've just said, which are quite germane. If you are doing well, at least, or not just even doing well, if you have enough income, or even if you don't have enough income that you have money, try to diversify perhaps your investments so that you can hedge against inflation risk. And perhaps how you can do that is you put your hand in many pies, as it were. If you do stocks, you do bonds, you do this, so that at the end of the day, the pie is larger. I hope I got that. At least I got a sense of this from the explanation.
System, yeah, the
yes.
risk.
Then the second one is depend on the community, or build on the community you have. So if you have, if you have a friends network, for example, we can come together and say, okay, Adedeji, Nancy, so this. We know that inflation is yes, bag of rice, and we share it.
Yeah.
So we can say, okay, let's bring 20,000 together. By the time we are like 6 or 10, we've been able to bring out 200,000 naira, and we all go to the markets and we pull it together. So,
sure.
So I like that part that you brought in. So people can actually look at that as a coping strategy against inflation. Okay, thank you for that. The other thing which I asked earlier, which I said I was going to go back in terms of the labor force, you mentioned unemployment and productivity, and for us also to speak about the labor force. From the eye of a researcher, what is the quality of labor that you see right now in Nigeria? Because we'll say, okay, fine, we have a lot of people that want to work but cannot find work. That's one. We have a lot of people, or we have jobs too, that people are not skilled in or skilled for. Then we have people that don't even want to work at all because they feel that I shouldn't be doing that kind of work.
Okay.
I hope you understand what I'm saying. And especially with the culture now that we're seeing in the country, everybody wants to just make quick money. Everybody wants to make quick money. Or people will just start jobs, so that 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they are gone. They are not interested anymore. You know, so how would you, what's your perspective on all this?
I mean, what you virtually highlighted are various problems we have in terms of in the labor market, in terms of both the demand and the supply. I mean, so you want to talk about, I mean, are people interested in working, but also what is the quality that people bring to the table when they want to work? I mean, those are challenges, but fundamental issue is the education system in that regard. And in terms of our incentive system, I mean, people respond to incentives. If the cost of, I mean, if someone offers a job of, say, 20,000, and you look at what you have, I mean, you want to say, should I try my luck elsewhere or something? So, in a way, the incentive system, the wage system, adequacy of the compensation and the rest, it's a major issue that really affecting this. But I think the fundamental part of this is the fact that we still have a lot of our resources that we are not putting to use. And we need critical thinking in terms of how do we utilize these resources. Either they are underemployed, even when they are employed, or I mean, they are not employed at all, or they are discouraged workers, like you mentioned. People that find out that, I mean, staying is better, I mean, staying at home is better than actually putting my leg and working. So those are kind of fundamental issues. And I think the thinking around this is how do we ensure that in a way, because we can't, I mean, there is not going to be development without we actually adequately both improving our productivity and also ensuring we engage a lot of these people. I think those are kind of fundamental structural issue that we need to address. And one thing is when we expand the pile, bring in kind of technology, bring in kind of thinking that ensure that not just we producing, but we are adding values such that we can expand the size of the economy. I think the gains, I mean, look at agriculture. I mean, before we talked about youth not interested in agriculture, but I mean, you see a lot of some innovations that we are saying that even you are the kind of, that youth are even like the kind of drivers. Yeah, so it's about if we provide this opportunity, I mean, things can change. But there are also a lot of, if you look at the rate at which people are graduating out of the school system and the rate at which labor market is expanding, you find that that is not going to accommodate. And you could see evidence of that in high emphasis on entrepreneurial skills. But I mean, entrepreneurial skill is good. I mean, it's a positive thing, but it's not very hard. I mean, for you to be a successful entrepreneur, it depends on the system and what you are working on. It has a lot of fundamentals, a lot of challenges. I mean, an entrepreneur takes a lot of years to even be a successful business. So those are kind of challenges that, even though when people go into that, I mean, you don't see the results immediately. So I think everything just needs to, we need to contextualize things, see where our problem is in terms of why we're not generating as much job as possible. Because even if we are saying, emphasizing on entrepreneur, I mean, if they're just replicating what is already there, if we are not bringing new things, creating new sectors, bringing innovation into existing sectors, what is actually hampering that kind of innovations from we actually expanding our key sectors. So if you look at every sector of the economy, I mean, the potential is that we can scale it up many folds. Why are we not doing that? I think that's the question, because when you talk about scaling up many folds, we are talking about jobs that will be created. And in fact, when you create most of these jobs, I mean, naturally, I mean, wage growth. Yeah, wage tends to also increase. Yeah, that helps everyone and address some of these shortcomings that we are seeing.
And also affect inflation, because perhaps MSMEs can also be one of the solutions in terms of bringing down inflation, in terms of, okay, see, if we're saying we're having structural bottlenecks, or in agriculture we need to produce more food, we need to process more food, we need to agricultural value chain and what have you, or manufacturing, and we see SMEs coming up in that space. But you've also brought up a very valid point, which is it's not necessarily the El Dorado, because for you to be a successful entrepreneur, so it takes a lot of time, and you must also be skilled, or you learn on the job too. Sure. But that will take a lot of time. But as we close the program, I want to ask you this fundamental question, which is the labor force which we have, really. Minimum wage in Nigeria is 30,000 naira, with inflation eating into it. The labor force that we have, is it a productive labor force, if we want to tell ourselves the truth? Is it really a productive labor force? Public labor force, is it really a productive labor force, including the private labor force?
Yeah, so I will hedge on that question a bit, and I mean, to say that, so people respond to incentives. And what are the kind of incentives really? Our accountability system, what does it look like? I mean, if someone does whatever he wants and get no punishment, people also believe that they can sit down in their desk, not doing anything, not being productive, and also get paid. I mean, so, I mean, we demanding for accountability. And when we demand for that, and there are penalties, I mean, those are clear ways to actually weed out people that are not productive. So in a way, if we have those systems, I mean, I will not say there are no kind of productivity kind of challenges we have, I mean, in terms of are this labor productive? But if we have those challenges, we need also a system to actually correct that. I mean, we can't just say because they are there, they are there. I mean, if we don't actually have a sound accountability system, we are just going to be living with this, and that's not a solution.
Okay. So I think the Minister of Labour and Employment has got to, you know, do something on that. Or I don't know if there are clear-cut policies or some of this, but anyway, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
On the show. Dr. Adedeji Adeniran is the Director of Research at the Center of the Center. Please help me.
For the Study of Economics of Africa.
Economics of Africa. Oh, thank God it's a Friday, so I can go and take a rest. You know, I'll resume on Monday again. But thank you very much for coming. Say me hi to your colleagues.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, that's the much you can take on today's edition of the program. Thank you all for joining us today, and not just today, being a fantastic our fan and a fantastic viewer from Monday till today. I will see you all on Monday. God willing, be the best you can be and be the change you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now.